Others, he's and she's, welcome to episode number 121 of my anime podcast. I am your host, Yata, and joining me in the cast today is my co-host with the most, our ethereal boy child made flesh, Taka of the Golden Fang.
I am all of you, and you are all me, and together we are my anime podcast.
Welcome one, welcome all to this latest edition of my anime podcast. This 121st edition of my anime podcast. How are you today, dear listeners? How are you today, dear co-hosts, on this finest of mornings, /afternoons, /evenings in Mananima land?
I am up, down, all around, in and out, doing pretty good. It's been a turbulent time, and it's been a while. We got to shake the rust off a little bit here.
It has been a wild time. A wild time indeed. Yeah, it's definitely been a rusty time as well. Mostly because of external factors. Last time we left you on my anime podcast, we were battling down the hatches as we were facing the early onset of a COVID outbreak, a COVID explosion. Well, true to form, cases have exploded, and we have been in lockdown for quite a while now. It was all fresh and new and shiny back when we were speaking last. Now it's like old hat, you know? Mm-hmm. It's been like approaching like I guess the midway point of our second month, which is still, you know, chump change compared to the veterans of the West. But still, you know, at least we're earning our stripes in that department. The other issues were rolling blackouts. Thankful to say that's not a thing anymore. Or at least it hasn't been a thing for a while. And severe drought, where water levels were down to about 2% of capacity, and we were deprived of running water for 2.5 days a week. Well, the rains have come.
The rains have come and washed away our pain.
Halle frickin' Luya.
Yeah, we're swimming in it now. I don't know about you, but it feels like every time I have to get out on the little scooter and go somewhere, it starts pouring.
Every time I have a little scoot, it starts to rain. I think except for today and possibly yesterday, it's rained. Yeah. It feels like it's rained pretty much ever since it started raining again.
If they could just spread it out a little bit, you know, a little bit sprinkling here so it's not a drought.
Absolutely. Yeah, my ideal situation would be like rains all night, wake up in the morning, it's all fresh and
right. And the sun's out.
And the sun is out. And then when I get back from work of an evening and I have dinner taken care of, we get another hour maybe of a shower, just to bring the temperature down again.
Yeah.
Then I can go out and like have a peramble or a run or something. And then in the cool afterglow, the cool after spray of an evening shower before returning, settling in for the evening, and then poof, the heavens open again, and it's, you know, it's piddling down, as we would say in PG land.
If we could only use our combined magics to control the weather in such a way.
I figure like 2 out of 3 ain't bad. The Rona is still a thing, but it's been a thing. Cool thing about that is I guess here it's like looking like things are picking up in the good way as opposed to case numbers. It's been gradually declining with the odd hiccup. So I think it kind of peaks at its worst at about, you know, 500 to 600 a day, which is about that number around the last time we spoke. Now, today it was 47 little cases, and our humble little city has been case free for a couple of days now. So that's pretty beautiful. Not to count any hitchens, count any chickens before they have hatched, or to jinx it, but feeling slightly optimistic.
In hindsight, it's pretty good that the government shut down schools for as long as they did.
Absolutely, yeah.
Definitely the call.
And pubs and restaurants and hiking trails and beach trails and public dining. A lot of things, like my local veggie restaurant.
Yeah.
For some reason decided to go, nope, we're done. We're closing. That was definitely a bit of a weird one because that's where I used to get veggie every day. And now now I can't get it there. Oh, chagrin. But that's a small problem. It's better than actually contracting the Rona. Anyway, on to brighter things. As we are wont to do at the beginning of every episode, we do tend to talk about how we've been doing. We're both alive and we're kicking, and we're not like choking on mysterious illnesses or bacterias or viruses. So our health is okay. What about the rest of your life? How you doing? How you been? Because I haven't seen you really since the last time. Face to face, it's been several months, but since we've sat down and done it like this and just shot the proverbials, it's been, you know, a very rare occasion with the
like 24 hours.
Well, yeah. Well, we had some business discussed yesterday, but prior to that.
No, yeah, it's been weird to let you guys behind the curtain a little bit. Yata and I used to meet up in person at least once a week, usually under the pretext of playing Magic.
Yeah.
But that sometimes didn't happen. It was just kind of like a muscle memory at some point, though, that like Friday night comes and we're going to go out and socialize. And that's just come to a complete halt.
Yeah. Friday night was like the boys' night. And that one was like non-negotiable. Saturday, it could be boys' night also. But that one was a little bit more up to the whims of change. Friday was like, no. I know you're pregnant. I know we're having the baby on Friday, but I have to go see the boys. I gotta slang the spells. I gotta try these new commanders out. Anyway, how you been?
Yeah, I've been all right. I think I owe the collective audience or maybe some of our listeners a bit of an apology because we are not doing Kill a Kill today.
Yeah, whose fault is that?
And that was promised last time we recorded, and that is completely on me. You have finished it.
I have. I'm actually working my way through all of the Trigger shows over this summer. I might as well say it. I want to do like a bit of a 10-year retrospective on Trigger. So I want to do. They have like 10 years out, and they have 10 shows, right? So it goes like Kill a Kill, and then the next anime that they released is when magical battles become commonplace, which I've never seen.
I've never seen that either.
Yeah, and it doesn't even look like a Trigger show. Like in terms of like the humor, in terms of the premise, it's very KyoAni or that mid 2010s JC stuff. But I will say this: half a dozen episodes in, it's really funny. I think it's the funniest Trigger show I've seen so far.
Really?
Yeah, but we'll save the Trigger talks for other triggery times. We're not getting triggered this episode. We're going to save all that camel toe and school uniforms for a later date.
Yeah, I would like to rewatch it. I've seen it before, of course, but I was just kind of, my head was in another space. Actually, funnily enough, I'll come clean. I haven't actually watched any anime since Gurren Lagann.
Back in 2008.
Well, back from the last episode, which I had just finished rewatching. We recorded and then boom, I just hit this rut, and I've been trying to think about why that happened, and I think I've got a good reason. It's going to sound like an excuse because it is, but unlike you, my teaching remotely experience has been very different. I've been at my desk at home teaching and making videos and basically doing all of the work that I would be doing in classroom, just like sitting right here where I am right now, recording videos. It gets really tiring. Look at my computer. I mean, it used to be that my computer and my desk was actually not a space for work as such as it was like entertainment. You know, this is where I sit and watch anime. This is where I sit and play video games or whatever I do. And now it has become my workspace. And so the last thing I want to do when I'm not working and sitting at the computer is keep sitting at the computer. Like I want to get out. I want to, and we can't really go anywhere, but we can still go out and walk around, and so like I've been doing that a lot to make up for everything that I can't go do. I'm just like out there walking, and you know what goes well with walking?
Talking.
Well, yes, and listening to audiobooks. So I've been plowing through books left and right. Most of the ones you know about. I think you know all the books. I think last time we talked, I said I had finished or was working through Kafka on the Shore. That was great.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that. You finished it?
Yeah, that was a while ago, but that was great. I listened to some more of the Magic Stories, Voice of All podcast. Shout out. I guess we should. Yeah. You turned me on to that one, and that's where I listened to the Children of the Nameless.
Yeah, that's where you get your Vorthos fix.
The Magic Story written by Brandon Sanderson, and then that turned me on to other Brandon Sanderson works because I thoroughly enjoyed it, as you do, as a Magic fan does. He enjoys a good story about fantasy, and especially that one. I thought it was very well written, and I was just down. I was on board for some more Sanderson, so I hopped into the Mistborn trilogy, which you've been trying to get me on for a while now.
Yeah. At least since I gave you the book, which was a couple of months ago. Definitely spoke about it before, for sure.
We definitely spoke about it, but yeah, you gave me the book a couple months ago, and you know, I can't walk around and read a book. Physical books. What are these? I have to listen to my things now because I have to be moving. You gotta be moving. You gotta get out there and get the blood flowing.
Yeah. For sure.
So I'm about halfway through the first book, and I was loving it, absolutely devouring it, and it got me thinking about world building because Sanderson, as much of an author as he is, he's also a bit of a theorist about fiction and plot and stories and world building, and it's something that we've been talking back and forth for a long time now, but a lot recently, and I thought that this would be the perfect time for us to have an anime related discussion about world building.
Yes, and that's what we're doing.
So we'll get to that eventually, but we got to hear what you've been up to, of course, and maybe shoot the breeze about Sanderson a bit.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, well, how about we just talk about Sanderson first? I've been a fan of Sanderson for a while now, and it was basically through the Wheel of Time, which is
right. Like he got brought on to write for that.
Yeah, after Robert Jordan died, his widow commissioned Brandon Sanderson to complete the series. I believe, and I'm not 100% sure now, I'm sure certain people in the Discord will let me know if I'm wrong with this, but I believe it was Jordan's wish, in case of emergencies or in case of like fatality in this case, that Brandon Sanderson was like the chosen one if Robert Jordan passed before he could complete the work on the Wheel of Time. So Brandon Sanderson took it on, and I was of the opinion that he was a little bit better than Robert Jordan, or at least that
really?
Like I remember like talking at rugby one day with one of the other guys who had read the books, and we both discovered that we were of that opinion, that we kind of preferred Sanderson's work, and he had read Mistborn, so he told me to go get Mistborn, and got Mistborn, read the first book, and quickly got to the second and third one. Like there was no pacing and spacing. I think it was pretty much, okay, I love the first one, let me immediately go out and purchase the second and third one. That was it really. And then in that time, just as I finished the third one, was when The Way of Kings was released, which is like his current like big thing, which is part of this thing called the Stormlight Archive. And I thought The Way of Kings was even better than the Mistborn. Now Naraku
right?
The
scope is broader.
Naraku's of the opinion that Mistborn is better than The Way of Kings. And I spoke to my brother about it because he's read the Mistborn as well. He's read the Mistborn series as well. And he, I think, preferred the Mistborn trilogy as well. Or at least he had a hard time getting into The Way of Kings. The Way of Kings is a lot slower, but I personally prefer The Way of Kings. It's also got one of the best like opening lines, I guess, in fiction. Now I got to drop you with this opening line.
You got to drop it on us.
Let me get it because I don't want to make a mistake here.
While you're looking that up, I feel like I know a lot about The Way of Kings, having not read any of it at all, because I somehow got turned on to listening to Sanderson's lectures. He puts a bunch of lectures online, and I guess he like does a class at BYU. So I think most of them are from there. So I've just been listening to him talk about his books, specifically the differences between Mistborn and The Way of Kings, because he brings it up a lot. I mean, it has his two most popular series, I guess, and it seems like The Way of Kings is definitely, it's a deeper well. There's more meat on the bone for sure, as far as like world building and like the scope of the story, but maybe Mistborn is a bit tighter. A tighter story. It's easier to get into.
Well, it's definitely easier to get into.
Yeah,
it's definitely clippier, and it's also like I find a little bit more jovial, if that makes sense, because I find there's a lot of humor to be derived from like the crew. It's very Ocean's 11 in that respect. I think there's like a very colorful gang, and there's a bit of getting the gang back together. And also what I really liked is the, I don't want to say too much of it, but the Regency aspect of it, attending balls and like the gossip and the
So where I'm at in the story right now, just because you said that, she just got done with her first ball.
Okay.
Vin just went to her first ball. She met Lord, the young Lord Venture.
Yes.
And
yes, that's an important one there. That's an important.
I know. I could tell right when it was happening, because apparently that's the only time she's ever been her true self, was around this random lord.
Yeah, this random, the son of the most powerful lord in all of the Last Empire.
He does a good job with foreshadowing, so I know that that's going to be important later. And yeah, I would agree that has been very entertaining. He describes it in his own lectures as it's Ocean's 11 meets My Fair Lady.
Yeah, that totally works. That totally works.
That's a pretty good synopsis there.
Yeah, with like high fantasy and
with high fantasy.
You know, what if Sauron kind of won? I guess the hook is like, what if the Dark Lord won?
Right.
He often talks about, I guess. So I have that line actually pulled up now. So
what's the first line?
Just to clarify, it's not the first line of the book itself. It's the first line of the first chapter. So chapter 1 of the first book, The Way of Kings. Now, I hope I get the pronunciation right, because you know when you see the words on a page, and then you actually have to read those words out loud. So there's a bit of a mouthful here in terms of a name. It is Suzet's son Valano, truthless of Shinovar, wore white on the day he was to kill a king. White to be bold, white to not blend into the night, white to give warning. For if you were going to assassinate a man, he was entitled to see you coming.
Huh.
It's a bar, right?
It is a bar.
It's such a dope line.
Now, what's the name there? Somebody's son?
Yeah, that's the tricky part. It's Suzette Zetsun Sun Valano, Truthless of Shinovar.
So how do you spell Sazed?
Not the way it's spelt in
Mistborn. Because we were just going to talk about, I was going to tell you that.
SZETH.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not.
Because there's a character, and I wasn't sure how to spell it. Because, of course, my first experience with it was listening, and it Sazad. Or I think it's like how they pronounce it or how the narrator pronounces it. And I was like, wow, how do they spell that? So actually, I've been consulting your hard copy for spellings because it helps for me to like visualize these weird words, especially names. Yeah. Because I'm like, what kind of name is that? And I mean, they're all like pretty fantasy name.
Yeah. I'm reading, what I'm reading is this. It's right here beside me, actually. This is Salman Rushdie, Luca and the Fire of Life. And it's like a children's tale written by celebrated author Salman Rushdie. So I guess it's definitely like couched as a tale for children. And I could imagine a princess writing it for like a sick child, but it's also, quite literary because it's Salman Rushdie. I'm a bit of a fan of Salman Rushdie, actually. I've over the years read about a good chunk of his books, maybe like 50% of his books. But I'm also on the fantasy thing. I'm also venturing out for recreational physical activity of an evening. And I've been listening to The Goblin Emperor. And then some of the names in that, dude, are just, it's ridiculous. Baron Echenecheveld, the servant, like something like that, right?
You told me a little bit about this story. It's got a half goblin, half elf, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so the way it works is there's this kingdom, and basically there was like a big air disaster, and it killed a good portion of the royal family and the emperor himself. And this is like the very beginning of the story. This is the premise, so it's not really like spoiling anything. And this character Meyer, as of right now, he's on his coronation day, so I'm assuming he's going to be the emperor. And consider the name of the book is called The Goblin Emperor. One would assume that he does assume the mantle of emperor, and he's basically thrown in from exile, essentially. But it's not really exile. It's sort of like exile to the country estate, right? Kind of like, oh, I'm tired of you, wife. I'm discarding you. You're gonna go stay on a far-flung country estate. And he's basically flung into the position of the next lord or the next emperor of this empire. And he's a mixed race though. He's half elf, half goblin. And it's just him getting to the capital and learning how to be the emperor. So
lordly.
And so far, for the reason I chose it was because the way it was going to couch for me was it was a bit more Regency and a bit more like the action and the adventure and the excitement was more the machinations of court intrigue than we'll say like overthrowing an empire or fighting demons or any of this stuff, right? It was a bit more like political, I guess. And I wanted to give that a try. Because I don't think it's to everyone's taste. Not everyone's going to enjoy a good ball. Not as much as Vin did on her first ball. I have a bit of a soft spot for like stuff like Jane Austen. I wanted to see what that was like in kind of fantasy form. And it is a genre of fantasy. This is like Regency fantasy. But it's not a genre I was overly familiar with. So I wanted to check it out. So far, it's pretty good. Names are absurd though. Like absolutely absurd. But I'm getting my head around it. And I'm enjoying
tongue twisters for you. Now, are most of the characters elves or they're goblins? Like, is it the empire of elves, right?
It seems like the nobility are elf, but there are goblins within that empire. But there's also like a goblin empire that sort of borders this empire that we're sort of set in. So I'm not really sure like right now how, like what is the breakdown ethnically of all the races. Ethnically is not the right term. The demography of like each race within the empire. But the one that he is in, Meyer, is definitely like predominantly goblin, or that's how it seems, because there is a big thing of like him being regarded as a hobgoblin, which is I assume is like a half goblin, and it being sort of like a negative thing, right? And his mom, who is a goblin, there was a lot of like prejudice, I guess, against her. So that's the thing as well. I think like it's dealing with like race, which is another interesting like dimension to take it from. And I think it's like an easy one to do with fantasy because of the fact that you have so many different races. You can have like hierarchies. Like that's the thing in like the Final Empire. I guess you have the idea of like a caste system there. Yeah. But with this one, the caste is more mythical race based as opposed to like nation based. Because another one I'd read recently was 100,000 Empires by N.K. Jemisin. Race and understanding of race is like a big element of her books as well. And you can see a lot of would say like the issues with America in 2021 and 2020 in her writing. It's also cool because you get like the perspective of not the traditional heroes, shall we say, in terms of like, oh, do I need another like white knight or some sort of white savior or some sort of like human even, right? Like getting like a goblin as like a hero. It's pretty interesting so far. Like I'm not. It's still early days. I don't really want to make a judgment call on it yet because what I've been doing is I've been listening to it as I've been going running because that's the thing I've started doing a lot, and that's the only thing I can actually deal with these days is just like running. Got very obsessed with it recently, and all my whole YouTube timeline is just like run focused. 13 of the last 14 days I managed to go out running, and generally before that would have like hurt me physically in terms of like I would have my knees or my ankles or whatever would have been pretty painful because I'm not resting it. But I found that because we've had so much time, we'll say, in front of a computer hunched over, I felt like getting a good balance in terms of like physical activity was very important. So I have been doing yoga as well. I started one of those like 30-day yoga challenges.
How many days ago?
18 days ago. Well, no, that's a lie. It was 21 days ago, but I'm on day 18. I finished day 18 yesterday, so I'm on day 19 right now. Yet to be done, though. So what I've been doing is I just do the yoga for like anywhere between 15 minutes and 35 minutes. Then I'll do like 10 minutes of meditation because they always end those yoga classes with like, all right, now we're going to go into, I think it's called Shavasana, which is like a corpse pose, right? You're just like lying there and you're like deep breathing and all that stuff. So I usually just extend that to 10 minutes, put on some meditation music and just meditate for 10 minutes. And then I will go out and do my run for the evening. And that's kind of kept me sort of semi... Actually, no, not semi. It's not kept me. I'd say it's actually improved my mental outlook over the course of the lockdown. Because at the beginning, it totally kicked my ass. The last episode, I was joking, like, oh, I would have been dead by now. That was a joke, but it was also like, it wasn't going great. But now it's like, oh, I like that routine. Because I had let myself get pretty bad at running to the point where I couldn't really do more than like 2 kilometers. I either needed to stop or I needed to like stop. Like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Because they're stopping and like, give me a minute. I'm going to start walking. And then there's like, all right, I'm done. I'm trying to work my way up to an hour. To running for an hour. Last night I did like 40 minutes, which is about as high as it's got so far. Because I'm trying to balance it. I'm trying to actually like make it more like scientific in terms of like how I'm doing it.
And that's like uninterrupted running.
Yeah, uninterrupted running. Yeah, I literally go out. There's a zebra crossing outside of my apartment building. Put my feet on that, and I run down to the Science Museum, which is like 700 meters, and then I will do a lap to the Science Museum until I hit a certain number. Then there's like a hill that I have to finish on, Heartbreak Hill, I call it, homage to Boston. And so I've been doing like 3 distance runs with the idea is just to improve my distance and not worry about like going fast or whatever. And then I've been doing like interval running, which is like you go for a certain like about 200 to 300 meters fast, then you do like you drop the speed for like 200 meters and you do another 300 meters fast. So you're kind of going like fast and slow. And the idea is there that you're actually building up your speed, while the other longer runs are towards the building up your stamina, right? What I want to do is I would like to get to like a 10-kilometer distance and time, and then go into like an 8-week training program. And by that point, it'll probably be close to, I don't know, at the rate I'm going, I'd imagine I'd probably need another couple of weeks or maybe a month, we'll say, to be conservative, to get to 10K. And then I will try and do an 8-week training program to get like into 10K shape. And then I might try and run the 10K if the world is open up again. I think that'd be pretty cool. I've definitely noticed it's been really good for the old mental health. Actually, it's probably more so the yoga, but the combination of the two of them is pretty good. And my YouTube recommendations are just like absolutely overrun with, it's just running videos. How to run when everyone sucks. Sydney McLaughlin, winner of the women's 400 meters final interview, taking the throne. Joshua Kipchoge's world record. He's like a 3,000 meter runner. I've actually been watching the US Olympic qualifying for track and field. I watched a bunch of running documentaries. The amount of documentaries I've watched on Kenyan runners over the last month or two has been crazy. I've definitely been getting back into it again. And because of that, I've managed to quit smoking again.
Hey,
hooray.
That was all a build up for that one drop.
Turns out it's very hard to run anywhere
when you're smoking.
Yeah. Or you go, okay, well, at the end of this run, I'm going to have a smoke. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. That was what I was literally doing. I started up about a month ago and I did like 3 days a week. And literally at the end of it, it'd be like, finish. And that's, if you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm miming lighting a cigarette. And then in my defense, I was like smoking less. I was down to like less than 5 a day, which is like, for me, it was progress. But I managed to get it down to 0 for the last 2 weeks. And it's definitely had a big impact in terms of like, because I've also had to, I've been very like conscious of numbers since I started doing it. I've been monitoring my heart rate, monitoring my resting heart rate, monitoring how like my heart rate throughout the course of like my min max in terms of like what I'm peaking at when I'm running. It's weird, like once you get into the weeds with certain things, like it's interesting. If I could give myself blood samples while I was running, I would, but I can't. I will say on the walks though, I love a good walk.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, you've been running, I've been walking.
Yeah.
And
like
enjoying them thoroughly.
Yeah, I think walks are great. I remember when I came back from Japan, not last summer, but the summer before last. I remember that summer, I was walking a lot. On the weekends, probably like an hour and a half a day of walking.
Yeah.
And then I found that the school schedule, when it was in full swing, inevitably got the better of how often I could go out walking. But for a good chunk of that summer leading into fall, there was a lot of big, hearty walks. Walks are great. I think it's good for the mind. It's good for the body, obviously. It's kind of underrated, actually. It's a good underrated exercise. Before I came to Taiwan, I had done the Santiago de Compostela, the pilgrimage across Spain, and every day you would have to walk. The smallest I walked on that during that like period of time was the 15-kilometer walk, which was coming into Pamplona, the city where they run the bulls. But the longest walk, there was days where I think I did a 46-kilometer walk one day, and that was like awesome because you just woke up and you just walked all day, and it really got you in the mind of like, oh man, walking is like a vibe, man. You know, you kind of like the idea is like you start at the beginning, it's like physical, it's tough, and it's like not many people, especially in our, not to get all like new agey about it, but especially in like the Western culture or like the 21st century, we're not used to being on our feet that much. You're kind of used to like migrating from like the office chair to the sofa at home. You know, you're sitting in your car and you're sitting at work and you're sitting at home. I think they said that the average US person does like 4,500 steps a day, which is like not great. When you should probably be getting like 8 to 10,000. So when you go from that to like walking all day, every day for like a month, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, after like the third or fourth week, you definitely get to like appreciate the grind. I remember sitting there in this public park in Santiago, or one of these like places in and around that area of Spain, with my kind of family of people I was walking with, in terms of like the friends I had met on the journey, right?
Yeah.
Which was basically anyone who could not speak Spanish.
It's not about the destination. It's about the friends you make along the way.
Yeah, and everyone was like, oh yeah, when I go home, I'm going to continue to walk every day, 10, 15 kilometers every day. It's a way of life, man. And it is a way of life. I'm pretty certain no one kept that up.
Well, it is hard when you don't have somewhere to go, because then you're just doing laps. Which is fine, but it just gets old easily. But the one thing that I've found that makes it not get old is if you're making progress in another place, like an audiobook.
Okay, so we're back and we are discussing magic systems and magic in general, because we wanted to talk about world building and how that relates to anime in the various shapes and sizes over a few episodes. Not back to back to back, but every so often, almost like a sub-series of the main, like My Anime Podcast, like reviewing of shows, right? So we discussed how we start our world building and what element we tackle first, and it was agreed upon that we would talk about magic, how you create and fashion a magic system to complement the show or the story or whatever. There's a bunch of anime that have quite famous magic systems, and that got you onto our boy Sanderson, who's quite famous in terms of like the fantasy community. I've seen his laws on magic applied to stuff like Harry Potter or Avatar: The Last Airbender, Full Metal Alchemist, and a bunch of other things. Yeah, he's kind of like created this really cool system. What he calls
it's almost like part of pop culture now. I feel
I would
like
say so, yeah.
More than half the people listening probably have heard of these laws, or at least heard the term, like Sanderson's laws of magic systems or whatever. And to be clear, we're talking about magic systems because they're easier to talk about, and because Sanderson writes fantasy and they often have some sort of magic system. But these could be anything. These could be like the technology that's used in your sci-fi books as well. Or this could just be the kind of story that you're telling. So one example that he gives in his lectures a lot is that it could be, this is Spy World and this is a James Bond film, and there are certain rules and expectations from a spy film, right? Everyone's going to be not trusting each other, and they're going to have, double agents, and there's going to be, everyone's going to be ready for action at all times. And like, there's certain rules that story will follow. And for fantasy, it's a little bit easier to parse those rules and to put them into boxes, just because they are related to a magic system, some sort of physics or some sort of construct of that world. So I thought it would be a good place to jump in. Anime has this in spades. A lot of the anime that we're going to talk about today are going to be shonen, because I find that they typically
have the magic.
Their worlds. They do the magic. They have the invented worlds. I mean, ideally we would be talking about fantasy, but it just so happens that most of the fantasy in anime is shonen, which is an interesting observation.
Yeah. Or isekai. I'm using that as foreshadowing, because I think isekai is actually perfect for one of the styles of magic that he talks about. So yeah, let's continue.
So let's get into it. I mean, I think we've got this beautiful medium that we both know a lot about, that hopefully you guys listening know a lot about, and let's just see how some of the shows that we've loved and grown up watching handle and tackle this this world building problem of how does the magic work. First of all, Sanderson's laws. So he's got 3 of them, or 3 like kind of well-known ones. I think there's another one too, but we're going to talk about 3. We'll start with number 1, and that is verbatim from Sanderson's essay. An author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. And so what that kind of means is, or this is how I interpret it, is you have to properly explain how the magic works before you can have characters in your story using it to solve important problems so that the reader can be on board. And I think it gets a bit into foreshadowing so that, you know, as a reader, you can kind of learn to anticipate, and, you know, it's fun to put the pieces of the puzzle together in your head as you're reading and go, oh, well, they could probably do this with that. Oh, I'm so smart. They did that, you know? And so that gets a part of it. And there's kind of a dichotomy that's, or at least a sliding scale that's been used a lot with this first rule, and that is soft magic versus hard magic. And I've been talking for a while. You want to explain soft and hard magics?
So,
or at least introduce it?
Yeah, I'm going to work off the dome here because these are probably the most buzzwordy ones in the...
Yeah, this is what is taken up and gotten the most traction for sure.
A hard magic is basically what it sounds like. It's the most hard defined, I would say. It's the most structured, it's the most ordered, it's the most rules to follow. It's the most well thought out, I guess, or the most textual in terms of like there's very little ambiguity about what magic can do and what magic cannot do in a hard magic system. It's almost scientific, right? Where in a soft magic system, it's sort of more magical, which is a very poor choice of words probably, but it is. There's more like wonder to it. It's more mystical. It's more like impenetrable, and you're not really sure like on the limits of what it can or cannot do. So I guess the most famous example in terms of like anime for like a hard magic system would probably be Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. At the beginning of every episode, they have that whole law of equivalent exchange, right? That is the whole backbone of the alchemy in FMA, is this idea of the law of equivalent exchange. And that's just like sets like a parameter on like how magic works. Nothing can be created without giving up something, right? Or something like that. I haven't memorized the opening too well, but you have to sacrifice this to make that, right? You have other things like Sanderson's Mistborn, which is a pretty hard magic system where this is how the magic works, this is how it's created, and this is how you perform the magic. Where if you think of something like Lord of the Rings,
this is the example he gives all the time. In Lord of the Rings, what can Gandalf do?
Everything.
And, who knows? You know, we don't know, but potentially everything except get the ring to Mordor and defeat Sauron. I guess he needs help with that, but he seems to be able to do whatever he wants, and we don't really know. And so that's that soft magic coming into play.
Yeah. Game of Thrones like this as well. We'll stick to TV show for the time being, but like what the Red Lady, what exactly she can do and what exactly she cannot do, or what the Lord of Light can do, or what even the Night King can do is almost situational.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's and even the characters in the story don't necessarily know. I think it's a sliding scale from going from soft to hard. You're understanding more about how it works. And that goes for the readers or the audience as well as the characters in the story, or most of them. I'm sure Gandalf knows what he can do to a degree, but most of the characters, the hobbits, the people that we are relating to the most, they don't understand how this works. And just like in Game of Thrones, they don't understand how the Lord of Light works, really. But then usually in those systems, there will be little pockets of hard magic, you know, like we know how this one thing works. Like we know how the ring works. You put it on, you're invisible, but Sauron can see you.
Yeah, because it's not as like simple as like hard and soft. It's like a spectrum, right?
It
like
is definitely
there's going to be like elements that are softer than others, and there's going to be elements that are harder than others. So if you think of like Harry Potter as an example, like there's rules. These are potions and spells that you literally have to make by brewing. You have to put like gillyweed and that to create this, and you also have like laws in terms of like what is forbidden and what is not forbidden, what is dark magic and what is good magic. But there's also this kind of soft element of what exactly can Harry do,
or what can't Voldemort do. Like what are the limits of this magic? We don't really know. We know how these parts of it work. And so, yeah, Harry Potter is a pretty good example of being right around the middle of like hard versus soft.
Like,
and
it's not completely floppy, but it's...
Yeah. It's like a sausage. Flops around a bit, but it's not completely hard yet. That's a thing that happens a lot too. I'm not just joking there. Is a lot of times over the course of a story, especially in anime, especially shonen anime, where it can go for so long, it gradually goes from soft to hard, right? As things are explained, the characters learn how the magic works or how whatever system is at play works, and the reader learns along with them. You get more backstory, you get more explanation, history, and everything kind of helps to fill in that blank, and it becomes more hard. It gets harder. Yeah, like what we could talk about with regards to hard and soft, we've already talked about Full Metal Alchemist, that one being very hard. I think a lot of the people in that world even realize what the magic is and how it works. You know, this is alchemy. Alchemists can do this thing, and we know that it requires equivalent exchange, and that we know that the limitations of it are. And of course, rules are meant to be broken. And so just because they understand the rules doesn't mean that the rules are never broken. Doesn't mean hard as in they can't be broken, but they are very hard in FMA. Whereas to contrast that, I think maybe a good example might be Naruto. There was just another one off the top of the head, shown in anime, completely fictitious world. As far as the magic system goes, it's always been a little bit loosey-goosey with like what exactly could ninjas do.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that there's chakra. And we know that there are these different jutsus, which are like techniques.
The big three was like the ocular one, which is what?
Well, this is a completely other thing. But before we even get to that, there's
genjutsu,
ninjutsu, genjutsu,
taijutsu.
taijutsu. Yeah. And those are like the three kind of schools of these techniques. And these techniques use chakra. They get broken down into elements at some point, and like some of them take a certain element of chakra. The system is not completely unexplained. There's a lot of it that is explained, but there's also not really a feeling of what the limitations are.
That's the issue.
And I think that becomes an issue for the storytelling as well, because there aren't these limitations set. It seems like as the story progresses, the characters just gain abilities. All of a sudden, this so-and-so can do that, and he can do this and that. And you never really know what the next adversary or what the next antagonist is going to pull out of his pocket. It can't be anticipated. It's going to be some crazy power, usually related to bloodlines and genetics. These great families, I guess, have these powers that have been passed down through the generations. You know, again, it's a sliding scale. I'd say that it is not completely soft, but it is more on the soft side than the hard.
Yeah, I think it started kind of relatively hard. There's a certain point where you're allowed to break your own rules, even if it is hard. Yeah. But it became a thing where it was just constantly resetting its own rules, or like resetting its own expectations or its own limiters, to the point where, well, eventually it just, one, started to contradict itself. So the laws were never really like laws anymore. And I guess it kind of fell into soft because it basically became, oh, he's doing this. Well, that's kind of unprecedented and undocumented in terms of like, well, no one knew that was even possible before. And nothing in the schematics of how the system is designed would suggest that that's ever possible. I guess with Full Metal Alchemist, you have the idea of like this human transfiguration. Is it transfiguration? Is that what it calls? Transmutation of a human. That's like a no-no, right? That's beyond the limits. So if you somehow manage to transgress that in a hard system, well, one, you're aware of the consequences of that. As in like, okay, this is the moment. This is the state of exception. And this is huge because of its relationality to the system itself. Where with, for example, the Izanagi, right? The Uchiha technique of like basically stopping time and rewinding time and getting them stuck in an infinite loop. Itachi did it too.
Is it the Mangekyo?
No, the Mangekyo, the Mangekyo was, you have to kill the one who's like the closest to you, right? So for Sasuke to unlock the Mangekyo Sharingan, he has to kill Itachi, right?
Right.
And Itachi to get his Mangekyo
he had a friend, I think,
but then it turns out, he had to kill Shusui or Shuisei, or that random Uchiha that just got dropped in after 500 episodes, who apparently was more powerful than Itachi, but Danzo somehow managed to beat his ass down, even though I think Itachi bodies Danzo. Like the whole thing is just it was a complete mess. And then it turns out that Sasuke's dad had the Mangekyo Sharingan. His dad is like complete bitch mode. There's no way. That's how messed it got. But the Izanagi he used it on Kabuto. When Kabuto had gone into a snake. It's actually a really cool technique if it was just like not shoehorned in after 600 episodes. He sets them in an infinite time loop where they just think that they're sort of like trapped in a sequence, endlessly repeating this same sequence over and over again. It's very complicated. It was one of those absurd Uchiha techniques that came out of nowhere, you know?
That was just unexplained.
No, they did explain it in the episode. It was very complicated, but there was no padding in terms of like, where the hell did that come from? Now, I'm sure there's like some Naruto stans who would be able to go, actually.
If you watched all 1,500 episodes, then you would understand.
The one that it really grinds my gears now is the fact that you have like, okay, you introduced the three styles, right? But then you also had these like natures.
These
for example,
elemental natures, right?
So like, for example, like Sasuke was like a lightning adept or whatever.
Yeah.
But it got a certain point where you just had these people who were just really good at almost all of the elements, right?
Yeah.
But now I
think it got there too quickly. It was the thing. It was like, oh, here are these elements, and most people do one, but now everyone from the rest of the, like, well, that's it.
Yeah. And they had a thing where I remember when Naruto was training to learn a new element style in Shippuden with with Yamato and Kakashi, and it took ages for him to learn a single style. It's got to the point now where in Boruto, that guy just basically knows all of them with little to no preparation.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, come on, dude. Like, where did that come from?
It's hard, though, because they all get jumbled up. And this is going to come into another rule later on. And it's going to sound like we are crapping all over Naruto.
I love Naruto, by the way. I love Naruto, by the way.
I love Naruto, too. I do think it went off the rails. And I can say confidently that I haven't finished it. And I will never watch every single episode of Naruto Shippuden because I just can't bring myself to.
I would say, like, I dropped it during the Great Ninja War, the fourth Ninja War, I think it was. And I picked it up again and finished it, but it was definitely more like a chore at that point.
But the world building and especially the magic system in Naruto can be scrutinized. I think another interesting example of hard versus soft is My Hero Academia, and that's because it's not one magic system as much as it is a bunch of individual systems at play. Because I mean, there are quirks, and I guess there's kind of the broader understanding of how quirks work. You're born with it. Quirks work. You're born with a quirk. You usually manifest around a certain age, and like, you know, we know that they go into these kind of categories, but how each quirk works is unique. Or at least somewhat unique, but they do operate by their own rules. And usually through the course of the story, either that character or, you know, the characters who are encountering this new villain figure out how that quirk works, what makes it tick, what it can and can't do. And so I would say that My Hero is actually quite hard, at least to the extent of like, yes, there's an understanding that maybe there exists a quirk, or like one of the rules or the understandings is that everyone can have one quirk. And obviously that's challenged in the show. And so like, I think that there's an understanding that maybe we don't know everything about these quirks. They certainly don't know why they happened, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of part of the premise is like, this is happening, this is a thing now, but we don't really understand why.
It was a genetic mutation.
It was like a mutation. It was, I guess, a bit X-Men-y.
Yeah, that's exactly. I was thinking of X-Men. They have that like mutant gene, right? But for them, it was like manifested in like a slight bone in your big toe or something like that, or your little toe.
Yes. Oh, in My Hero for sure. It was. I think you had an extra joint in your little toe or something.
Yeah, and that was the sign, I guess, like the physical.
Yeah, it was like a genetic marker that you would have a quirk. And so I think it's very well defined as far as a system of a society, and it's actually quintessential and representative of most superhero stories, in that the powers are usually very well understood. Maybe Superman would stretch that a little bit because what can't he do? His
power comes from the sun.
From the sun?
Yeah, I think. So it's
it is. Yeah. He is powered by the sun.
He's solar powered. Goodness.
Which actually kind of makes sense.
At least they try to explain it. It wasn't just like magic. I think intuitively you say, is it the gravity is so bad, like, or so heavy on Krypton that maybe he's just like, you're so used to like,
and then
the
that's
pressure.
what kryptonite is, right? It's a rock from his home world. And so apparently that's why he's super here, is because there's no kryptonite. And like kryptonite just does that to the Kryptonians. As I'm saying this, obviously, I don't fully understand Superman.
Yeah,
so we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on from that.
I saw you have One Piece in the docket there. I can't even comment on One Piece. I didn't even know they had powers. I thought they were just pirates. That was like literally the thing.
They're pirates. So in One Piece, it's more of a hard magic system. In One Piece, they eat these fruits. They're called devil fruits. The devil fruits, and they give you an ability, and it works pretty close to like a quirk, right? It gives you a very specific power. Like Luffy, his body turns to rubber, and so he can basically do what rubber can do. That's it. That's the power. It leaves room for you to be creative a lot of times, right? Like just like how, you know, Spider-Man can use his powers creatively. The sky's the limit on what you can, you know, your imagination on how you use this power, but how it works is pretty well defined for each devil fruit. There's another magic system at play in One Piece called Haki, which is kind of like hardening of your spirit to do certain things. There's a couple things you can do with it. One, you can harden your physical body. Two, you can kind of enhance your senses. And now that I'm saying it, it sounds a lot like the Mistborn magic system. So basically you've got you can burn pewter, you can burn tin and enhance your senses to what people are going to do. But it also enhances, like, you can predict what they're going to do. So I guess in that sense, it's a little bit like burning.
Oh, the 12th one.
Atium.
Atium, yeah.
And then there's another Haki, which is very rare, which is called Conqueror's Haki, which they don't really specify that it's genetic, but only a very select few people have access to this power. And it allows you to basically influence emotions on a mass scale, like get people to do what you want. Again, very similar to the Mistborn magic system. Of course, they're not burning metals in One Piece. But again, I think that all of these magic systems are well explained, at least by the end of it. But as it goes, this is kind of the perfect example of a long-running shonen where it gets harder as it goes along. Because in the beginning, even Luffy doesn't really understand his own devil fruit power. He knows that he's made of rubber, but he doesn't really know what he can do with it and what the limitations on that are. But as the anime progresses, or as the manga, the story goes, Luffy figures out how his power works more, and they figure out how the devil fruit works more. And as a reader, you start to understand how the magic systems work more and more. I think that's enough examples for now. We may touch on another couple shows later if they come up, but
Death Note.
How
hard that one is.
Very hard. The rules are explicit, how this power works and, you know, exactly what it does and how you have to use it. And it's kind of like the rules of a chess match, right? Like, this is how the game works and you have to play by the rules.
I was thinking of also isekai. I think isekai is a genre because it's so couched in this computer game sort of framework that it's perfect to be hard.
The isekai that are based on being sucked into a video game.
Yeah, or even the ones that are not necessarily a video game, but it's got video game interface almost.
Yeah.
Like, you think like Slime, for example, right? He's not in a video game, but it runs on this sort of video game-esque interface where he has this
runs
sort
on
of
the
like
Unreal Engine.
Is it wrong to pick up girls in a dungeon? Even though it's not an isekai, it's very like game focused. So theoretically, you could put quite a hard system in place over that.
That's kind of the beauty of that genre. Even though they don't explicitly explain their magic systems, they all operate off the same general principles of, and I guess at this point, it's just like the isekai principles. You know, I think it's transcended the game RPG principles. And now it's just like, you're doing an isekai, you don't necessarily have to explain how the magic works.
Yeah,
because there's all of this expectation that goes along with the genre.
I think a lot of them, it's like start with unlock and acquire additional abilities as you sort of progress. A lot of it's like object focused. You know what I mean? It's like power ups. Yeah.
To bring it back around, I think that hard versus soft is an interesting conversation, but that's not really the rule. That is not the point of this rule.
Yeah, it's also not one better than the other either.
Yeah, it's not that one's better than the other, or that, you know, if you're doing it soft, you're doing it wrong and you need to explain more. It's more that you need to follow the hardness as far as how your characters and your problems are being solved. And so I think that that's where some of these can fall apart. It's not that Naruto's system is soft. It's that almost every problem in that show is solved by somebody getting a new ability or somebody leveling up and using the magic system to overcome the new foe or the new enemy, the new danger. And a lot of the times those aren't well explained. Particularly like the villain powers are a lot of the times just like, what? Like, that is possible now? And I don't know what he can or can't do, but it seems like he can destroy the world now. But good thing Naruto has like a million abilities from all of his teaching, from Jiraiya, from the ninja. Like, he's got all these other jutsus that he can do, but he basically has an infinite well of chakra, so he can just do like unimaginable things. And yeah. Like, it doesn't make for as satisfying of a story as opposed to something like Lord of the Rings, which does soft very well. The problems have to be solved by the party. Sans Gandalf, right? Gandalf can't just do everything for you. He goes away for like half the books and he's like, you know, you have to do this on your own. And when the magic comes into play, it's always like this sense of wonder, this amazement of the world. But that's not really what the characters have access to for solving their problems.
I wonder, should we leave it there for now and hop back onto it next time? Because there are other rules.
There are 2 more rules. There's also another anime that I think would be really great to talk about.
Give us a taste. What's it going to be?
Well, there's going to be people flying around, and there's going to be giants, and there's going to be blades, and there's going to be
the most badass protagonist who starts off as a bitch. Until then, fair listeners, we'll see you again next time to talk about other laws. Dun dun dun.
Cross.
Bye bye. Love you. Bye.